Madam Speaker, Mr. Vice President, honorable members of the United States Congress, ladies and gentlemen. I am really, truly honored and grateful for the privilege of addressing you all today and to represent the 29 members of the NATO alliance. 70 years ago tomorrow, NATO's founding treaty was signed in this great city. And on that day, President Truman said, "We hope to create a shield against aggression and the fear of aggression, a bulwark which will permit us to get on with the real business of government and society, the business of achieving a fuller and happier life for all our citizens." Our alliance was created by people who had lived through two devastating world wars. They knew only too well the horror, the suffering, and the human and material cost of war. They were determined that this should never happen again. And they were also determined to stand up to the expansion of the Soviet Union, which was taking control over its neighbors, crushing democracies, and oppressing their people. So they founded NATO with a clear purpose: to preserve peace and to safeguard freedom. And with an ironclad commitment by all members of the alliance to protect each other. They made a solemn promise: one for all and all for one. This commitment has served us well. Peace has been preserved, freedom maintained. Yes, allies have been involved in conflicts in different parts of the world, and allies have suffered the pain of terrorist attacks. But no NATO ally has been attacked by another country. The Cold War ended without a shot being fired in Europe, and we have experienced an unprecedented period of peace. So the NATO alliance is not only the longest-lasting alliance in history, it is the most successful alliance in history. Ever since the founding of our treaty, our alliance in 1949, every Congress, every American president, your men and women in uniform, and the people of the United States of America have been staunch supporters of NATO. America has been the backbone of our alliance. It has been fundamental to European security and for our freedom. We would not have the peaceful and prosperous Europe we see today without the sacrifice and the commitment of the United States. For your enduring support, I thank you today. So, NATO has been good for Europe, but NATO has also been good for the United States. The strength of a nation is not only measured by the size of its economy or the number of its soldiers, but also by the number of its friends. And through NATO, the United States has more friends and allies than any other power. This has made the United States stronger, safer, and more secure. Madam Speaker, Mr. Vice President, it is good to have friends. Yesterday, as I flew over the Atlantic, I looked out of my window at the ocean below. The great ocean that lies between our two continents. The Atlantic does not divide us, it unites us. It binds us together. And for Norwegians like me, the Atlantic Ocean defines who we are. Indeed, it was a Norseman, Leif Erikson, who was the first European to reach American shores. Almost 1,000 years ago. A fact more people would know if he hadn't left so quickly and decided not to tell anyone about it. For adventurers like Leif Erikson, the Atlantic Ocean was never a barrier. Rather, it was a great blue bridge to new lands and new possibilities. For millions of Europeans, it has been a bridge to freedom, sanctuary, and hope. My grandparents were among them. My mother was born in Paterson, New Jersey. And I lived part of my childhood in San Francisco. So this has given me a sense of kinship with this wonderful country, a kinship that has only grown throughout my life. For instance, I remember well during the Cold War when I was a conscript in the Norwegian Army. Our forces were trained and equipped to hold the line. But we knew that we could not take on the might of the Soviet Union alone. And Norway is actually bordering the Soviet Union, or was bordering the Soviet Union in the Cold War. But we also knew that we were not alone. We knew that if needed, our NATO allies, led by the United States, would soon be there with us. We enjoyed a level of security that only our transatlantic alliance could provide. So thanks to NATO, as a young man during the Cold War, I felt safe. And that says something about the strength of our alliance. Madam Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress. At the entrance to the NATO headquarters in Belgium, there are two monuments. One, a piece of the Berlin Wall, designed to keep people in and ideas out. It failed. It failed. It failed because the ideas and the values of those who built it were less compelling and less powerful than ours. Because we, as NATO, were resolute, we stood together and would not back down. The other monument is a twisted steel beam from the North Tower of the World Trade Center. A memorial to the ordinary people going about their business on an ordinary day when the unthinkable happened. A memorial to the 2,977 people who lost their lives on 9/11. A reminder of how all NATO allies stood with the United States in its hour of need. One monument is a symbol of freedom, the other a symbol of solidarity. Both are symbols of NATO, who we are and what we stand for. What so many of our brave men and women have fought for and sometimes died for. But not in vain and not alone. The men and women of our armed forces have served together over decades. This includes actually also many of you in this room, in this Congress, in my delegation, and I pay tribute to you and to all those who serve in the defense of freedom. There is no higher cause than freedom. And in these two monuments, we see the challenges we have overcome as an alliance. We deterred the Soviet Union during the Cold War, stopped wars and atrocities in the Balkans, fought terrorism from Afghanistan to the Middle East, welcomed the newly free nations of Central and Eastern Europe into our alliance, helping to spread democracy, peace and prosperity. And NATO's door remains open. This year, the Republic of North Macedonia signed the accession protocol. And with your support, North Macedonia will soon become the 30th member of our alliance. So what started in 1949 with 12 members has proven a powerful force for peace, an alliance that others strive to join, showing the historic success of NATO. But as you all know, success in the past is not a guarantee of success in the future. And we have to be frank. Questions are being asked on both sides of the Atlantic about the strength of our partnership. And yes, there are differences. We are an alliance of many different nations with different geography, history, and political parties. Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and Labour, independents, Greens, and many more. This is democracy. Open discussions and different views is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength. So we should not be surprised when we see differences between our countries. Today, there are disagreements on issues such as trade, energy, climate change, and the Iran nuclear deal. These are serious issues with serious disagreements. But we should remember that we have had our disagreements also before. The Suez crisis in 1956, the French withdrawal from military cooperation in NATO in 1966, or the Iraq War in 2003, which was strongly supported by some allies and equally strongly opposed by others. The strength of NATO is that despite our differences, we have always been able to unite around our core task, to defend each other, protect each other, and to keep our people safe. We have overcome our disagreements in the past, and we must overcome our differences now, because we will need our alliance even more in the future. We face unprecedented challenges, challenges no one nation can face alone. The global balance of power is shifting. The fight against terrorism is a generational fight. We have only just seen the beginning of the threats in cyberspace. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and big data could change the nature of a conflict more fundamentally than the Industrial Revolution. And we will need to continue to deal with a more assertive Russia. In 2014, Russia illegally annexed Crimea. The first time in Europe that one country had taken part of another by force since World War II. And we see a pattern of Russian behavior, including a massive military buildup from the Arctic to the Mediterranean, and from the Black Sea to the Baltic. The use of military-grade nerve agent in the United Kingdom, support for Assad's murderous regime in Syria, consistent cyber attacks on NATO allies and partners, targeting everything from parliaments to power grids, sophisticated disinformation campaigns, and attempts to interfere in democracy itself. NATO has responded with the biggest...
All right, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg there speaking to the Congress and talking about the differences that have been shared across nations and across NATO members, but that in the end we are always united. Of course, NATO, the strategic alliance that is responsible primarily for the defense of the region ever since the end of World War II.